Agriculture. This is a third way that people have to provide for themselves. And it has a number of advantages and some strange disadvantages as well. The first of all, the advantages. It is by far the most efficient way to use your land as far as supporting a number of people, which means more people living per acre, which means that you're going to have the most to say when there's disagreements with other people, because more people banded together to work together is going to be very effective in self-defense. And remember, that's important in the ancient world because there's no U.S. Marines to come rescue you. Secondly, you're not going to move around so much because now you're going to be husbanding plants. And because you're husbanding plants instead of animals, you don't move around a whole lot. You stay in the area. Now, the area you're going to stay in is normally going to be in a river valley because, at least the most efficient ones are, because of the fact that then you can practice irrigation, which is digging ditches and channels to get that water out of the river to your crops, because getting regular water to your crops is absolutely essential. Another advantage is that you can start having a community and you can be very famine resistant. What that means is that not everybody is going to be forced to spend their time growing food. You can actually have people doing other jobs instead, and only most of the people have to spend their time producing food. You can also have planners and soldiers and priests, which are three new specialists that you're going to be able to do, which is going to lead to the ability to make cities. Now, drought resistance. Man, are agriculturists drought resistant? Because if they have a bad year, they're able to eat the food that they've got stored up from last year, because grain can be stored in jars. And then at least in the short term, if there's a lack of food, you can just go to your storage and you can get some food. If a hunter-gatherer isn't finding any berry bushes or any animals, he goes hungry. And after a little while, he starves. He doesn't have a lot of food reserves. The herder, he can last a little longer, but if his sheep start dying, they don't keep very well. So this is the ability to keep alive, even if the drought is on for years, instead of only perhaps weeks or months. But this comes with a long-term problem. You see, they're dependent on those river valleys. If a river changes its course, then that can destroy an entire city, because of the fact that if in the long term the river isn't flowing through anymore, those farms are just going to dry up. And that's what happened in the Indus River Valley civilization, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, in what is today Pakistan. The course of the river changed, and the entire civilization, and it was very advanced civilization too, just got bypassed by the river and it got abandoned. First of all, mostly you're growing grain. What is grain? It's grass. If you've ever not mown your yard on time and you get those little things up at the top of the grass with all the seeds and stuff, that's the grain. That's what they're looking for. They would have very tall grasses, and they would grow them, and they would specially go for the ones with really big seeds. And wheat, rye, barley. These are different kinds of grasses, and the main difference between them, other than maybe a little bit of taste, is the fact that they grow at different times and in different seasons. And so that can be very important, that you would be able to grow different kinds of grains at different times of the year. That is good use of your land. So since you're growing grain, what you do is you let the grass grow tall, and then you have to come in and you have to reap it. Which means you take a bladed instrument, normally curved like a sickle or a scythe, and you cut down the grass, and then you bind it up into sheaves. And you take those sheaves back, and then you have to abuse your grass to get the pieces of grain to come off of the stalks of grass. And that's done by threshing. And there's two main ways to thresh. One is to hit the grain with a blunt object, like maybe a flail or with a stick or something, to knock them apart. But in the Bible, it talks about threshing. And in this, you would take a sledge and you would attach it to one of your work animals, like an oxen. And then you would just drive it over the grain until such time as the grain and the grass are no longer connected to each other because you've beaten it up so much you've knocked the grain off. Then you can gather most of that grass, which they call chaff, and pull it off, and you can burn it, you can use it in making bricks, you can feed it to your oxen, all kinds of things you can do. And then to get the last of the grain away from the chaff is you have to winnow it. There's a couple of different ways to do this. One is you can use kind of a blanket or a tarp, and you can throw it up into the air, and then the wind will catch the chaff and blow it away, and the grain will fall straight down. Another thing to do is you can take a big fork, and the fork, you can just stick it in there and then throw the stuff up in the air, and the chaff blows away. Now the thing you want is you want a lot of wind. So in the hill country of Judea, where most of this action takes place in the Bible, you want to be up on top of the hill because that's where the best wind is. So if you were to be down at the base of the hill, you would not be in an ideal place to be winnowing your grain. I'm just saying that, in case you run into a Bible story that talks about that sort of thing. But grain is not the only thing that they grew. They also grew grapes. Grapes were what they used to make wine. And grapevines were very valuable, and they took a lot of work to make sure that everything was compostatic with them. Here's what you do. You have to take and you have to make trellises, and then the vines grow on them. You have to make sure there are no weeds. You have to keep the animals out. You have to take really good care of them. And it's important that you choose really good grape stock because you don't want to taste nasty, foot tasting grapes. So there you go. And then you take your grapes down to the base of the hill and you go to the wine press. And in most situations, they would have community wine presses where everyone would use them, and they would be made out of stone or out of brick. And they would have a couple of kind of like little swimming pools almost, where you would stock the grapes, and then there would be little channels where the grape juice would flow down into another container towards the bottom, also probably made out of stone. And that's how they would do making wine. Another thing they liked to grow was olive plants, olive trees, and also other kinds of trees like maybe figs or palms. And the thing to know about these is that, first of all, I hope you know that you can't just start off getting fruit or olives from a baby tree. You have to spend a long time growing them and bringing them up before you're ever going to get anything out of them. But once they're producing fruit or producing olives, they're very valuable, especially the olives, because olives get pressed into olive oil, which is how they light their lamps. That's how they see at night. And so that's big money. If you've got an olive tree or even multiple olive trees, that's very valuable. That is going to mark the difference between a less and more wealthy agriculturalist. And so those are very, very important. Well, I hope you were blessed and built up by my series on biblical history. If you like this sort of content, I would encourage you to bless me by liking and subscribing and hitting the notification button. If you like this sort of thing, I also have a book out called A Helpful Handbook of Hebrew History. It's available for WisePath Books at Amazon.com. Links in the description below.